Today, we are continuing on with our work about writing about reading. And to do that, we really need to raise our level of notes that we are taking as we write about our reading. And to do this, we need to understand a story and pay attention to the story elements as we're reading. Now, there is a really certain things that we should be paying attention to as we're reading, and there's certain things really great readers are always focusing on. Characters are one part of this. So we want to look for their character traits. What's motivating the characters to do things? What relationships do the characters have? And what life lessons are the characters learning? Charts and webs are a great way to pay attention to characters in your notebooks as you're reading your own stories. A second thing a lot of great readers pay attention to is the plot. Remember from fourth grade, you learned about story mountains and how stories kind of follow that similar event into a big problem that's trying to be solved, and then that following action to come to the resolution. So, how are events impacting each other? How are events from earlier in the story connecting to things happening later on as we go? A story mountain is something you could draw in your notebook or a timeline as you're tracking the plot of your story. Another thing readers pay attention to is the setting. The setting and where a story takes place really does matter and affects how the story plays out. Is there a certain mood to the setting? Does it seem sad? Does it seem happy? Does it seem kind of spooky? Is the setting changing? And pay attention if it is changing to how it's changing. How does the setting affect the characters? In our story, the setting plays a big role on Keck's life. The setting is something you want to make sure you're tracking in your own stories. The final thing we should be paying attention to is repeating objects. And I know you did this work last year with the tiger rising and the symbolism of some of those objects within the story. This is something you should always be paying attention to when you're reading fiction. Because if an author is choosing to repeat an object, it means it's important. So you want to be asking yourself, why? Why are they constantly spotlighting that object? Is it standing for something more? Is it symbolizing something? In the same way that that cage really symbolized the feelings being trapped in the tiger rising in that work you did last year. So these four things are things I want you paying attention to as you're reading for the rest of this year. Characters, plot, setting, and repeating objects. And I want you to take a second and pick one of those areas that you really want to focus in on in your independent reading today. And then I want you to ask yourself, how can you organize your notes around this? Do you want to try to use a chart, a web, a timeline, a big idea, and a quick write about it? Now, as we're doing this, we still want to think back on all the work we've been doing. So as you read, you are reading knowing that you're going to have to write about that. So you're reading with that idea of seeing more, of digging deeper. You should always be reading the upcoming text with those previous ideas you wrote in mind to build on what you're already thinking about. And now we added on that we want to notice more elements of the story. We want to notice characters, setting, plot, repeating objects, and the mood of the story. And that's going to help you to dig deeper as you are going. Now, don't forget, you have a lot of great places where you can be finding really good fiction stories. You could be reading in Sora, you could be reading in Epic, you could get books from the Aurora Public Library, or you can use the books that you have at home.